call to order our study session.
Good idea.
All right, thanks, Jer.
Go.
Huh?
Where'd you go?
Oh, I didn't bring it.
Oh, dang.
Oh, he's harassing me. Yes, he is. So, first on our agenda is the a presentation from our town hall arts.
Hello, Karina.
Friends. Councilmember Elrod has entered the room. Late.
Acknowledged by Patrick.
So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you guys and go ahead.
Okay, I will start. My name is Denise Cato, and I am the president of the Board of Directors of Littleton Town Hall Arts Center. And with me here this evening is J.D. McCrum, who is the vice president of the board and president-elect of the Board of Directors, and also Sharon Wilson, who is our new executive director at Town Hall Arts Center. I'd like to start by thanking you all for inviting us to participate in this study session. Town Hall Arts Center has appreciated the support of the City of Littleton for the past 38 years. And during that time, we've really become an anchor of Main Street and an institution that most everyone is aware of. And of course, we owe a lot of our success to and we'd like to give thanks to the City of Littleton staff and city management, as well as the public works and maintenance staff who have helped us take care of our building. And also important to us is our connection with and the support from the Littleton Police and the Littleton Fire Department, a relationship that we hope to continue with the South Metro Fire District as we move forward. Over the last 5 to 6 years, many of the current and former city council members have engaged with us as we have been doing our planning for our Vision 2025. We know that you've taken the opportunity for tours of the theater and our building, have attended shows at our theater, and supported new programs such as the Mark Stallman Memorial Theater and Movement classes for children and adult students with disabilities. And as you all know, Town Hall Arts Center has somewhat become a victim of our own success. The building that we currently occupy, the space that we occupy, is fully programmed all year, and we intend to remain a downtown institution and maintain the impact that we bring to Main Street as reflected in the impact summary that we have submitted for your review. So we come here tonight with a 10 to 12 minute presentation. In the time since we last presented to you in 2016, we have been working to move forward with our vision planning. And tonight we're open as far as the format goes. You can feel free to interrupt us with questions as needed, or if you want to wait until the end, that's fine too. If necessary, we're happy to return to this council, to this body, or to meet with individuals as needed to answer any questions or present more information to you. And now I'll turn it over to JD.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to share with you tonight a brief recap and overview of Vision 2025. You'll forgive the notes. I can talk for hours and hours and hours about this. It's something I'm passionate about. And so I'm going to rely on my notes so I
Less is more.
just to that. Town Hall Arts Center has long recognized the physical limitations of our building. And while the architecture and design of the space is an important part of what we are known for, it has also come to substantially limit our ability to grow programming and serve our expanding patron demographic. In 2013, our board began a 2-year process, first by confirming our organization's mission, which is to enrich the cultural, social, and educational life of the community through professionally produced live theater, concerts, other events, and year-round educational programming for children and adults. We then investigated the obstacles to fully realizing this mission, which include board composition, financial restrictions, fundraising capacity, and limits of our physical space. We have taken steps to deliberate steps to take on each of these, but since we're here tonight to talk about the physical plan, that's what I'm going to focus on. Through March of 2015, we engaged in more than 400 stakeholders surveys and focus groups representing a range of populations, including our audience, community members, business owners, teachers, parents, students, individuals that utilize the space and rent it, our organizational volunteers, staff, and representatives from the city of Littleton. We conduct dozens of focus groups, learning about topics including the amenities of other local theaters, backstage accommodations, commuting and parking habits, facility safety, and so on. We utilize spaghetti mapping to understand how patrons use the space, and we have more details than you'd ever care to imagine about the time it takes to use the restroom at intermission. The results were a thorough understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the current downtown facility and a comprehensive facility vision that outlines what space needs exist in order to propel our mission into the future. Specifically, we have identified a need for 12,000 additional square feet within 5 miles of the historic downtown theater. This would provide a secondary space to relocate our administrative, educational, rehearsal, and technical functions. Should we be able to obtain 16,000 square feet, we would also include a 99-seat black box flex space to further enhance our programmatic portfolio and community offerings. What this second facility would allow is for the organization to undertake a capital campaign and reclaim underutilized space in the current historic downtown facility, including a complete rebuild of the second floor theater. It's important here that I pause for a minute and let you know that we've heard time and time again from our citizens, from our patrons, from our users, that the second floor theater with all its quirks are what make it such a unique space. And so we don't intend to change that. We intend to keep it. The changes instead would focus on safety and user comfort, including wider entry and exit corridors, safety handrails, new seats, and better soundproofing and acoustical features. Additional design elements on the second floor would be incorporated to further enhance the theater's technical quality, including the ability to move sets and people and props and so on and so forth on and off the stage. Also included in the remodel of the downtown facility would be a total update of the backstage spaces, including our dressing rooms, which would help to attract the very best artistic talent in the region and ensure that, when appropriate, our theater is capable of accommodating the contracts and writers necessary to bring in national and international talent. Finally, our campaign would include a complete remodel of the main floor, transforming the now choppy and divided space into what we are referring to as the living room of Littleton, where not only our patrons, but all visitors of the city have a space to feel welcome, connect with the city and learn about what it has to offer, enjoy a cup of coffee, experience theatrical, musical, and visual art, or just sit and engage with each other for a few minutes between stores downtown or while waiting for their table at a nearby restaurant. From a scheduling standpoint, this remodel will enhance our status as a downtown anchor, allowing us to increase our public programs and the economic impact from those programs from 4 nights a week to 7. It will allow the space to be available more often for other users, including nonprofit organizations, as well as some private rentals. It will allow the current art gallery, now hidden away in the back, to be a prominent and accessible feature. And through all this, it will activate Town Hall from Main Street. Today, while the facility is almost constantly in use, the current design of the building often leaves passersby with the impression that we are not any other office building or an inactive space of little interest to them. Before I conclude, I want to highlight for you just a few of the features we have planned for the second space. While not exciting or particularly noteworthy to the general public, one of our top priorities is to provide a safe and comfortable workspace for our technical staff. In the interest of time, I won't elaborate, other than to say if any of you have had the pleasure of a basement tour at Town Hall, you know how important that is to not only the city, but our organization and to the gentlemen that work down there on a daily basis. Currently, we conduct rehearsals in the downtown facility 3 or 4 nights a week. When that space is unavailable, for whatever reason, we beg, borrow, and rent other spaces throughout the city. It isn't unheard of for our casts to spend 4 consecutive nights of rehearsal in 4 unique spaces. The new facility would provide a professional, dedicated, and state-of-the-art rehearsal space for our casts to use. Both the technical and rehearsal spaces will not only improve user safety and efficiency, but will directly contribute to a higher quality end product for our patrons' enjoyment. In our current building, education often gets third or fourth fiddle when it comes to space availability. Based on demand, we have begun offering multiple classes in 2 off-site facilities where our wait lists continue to grow. Our research indicates that we could triple or perhaps quadruple our educational offerings within the first 6 months in the new space. This includes not only more of the programs we already offer, but new experiences designed to expose and train children in the art and elements of live theater. Also improved with a non-downtown educational space would be drop-off, loading, and parking for buses, as well as enhanced convenience for parents dropping off younger kids for their classes. Finally, if we are able to obtain the square footage for a black box theater, we have identified at least 60 nights of additional programming that we can offer, including new writers' workshops, cabaret-style musical performances, one-man or one-woman shows, and straight plays. These are all important elements of performance art that don't lend themselves to the 260-seat, 6-run offers that we offer in the current space. But they would fit very well in a smaller venue with shorter performance runs and would reach new audiences for Town Hall and attract new visitors to Littleton. At times when Town Hall is not directly programming these new spaces, availability would be extended to other nonprofit organizations for rehearsal, education, or performance use. We also field hundreds of requests every year for use of our space for corporate events, birthday parties, weddings, and so on. Inactivity of the new space is not a concern for us. Tonight's presentation represents 5.5 years of research and organizational planning. Our research shows that a second facility would not only enhance and improve the historic downtown location, but would serve as a community anchor, social hub, and economic driver in its own right.
All right. Denise and JD have given you kind of the background on why THAC can't meet the needs of the Littleton community in our current space. Now I want to explain what we are requesting from the city, so I get the good part. Thank you. Over the last 12 months, Town Hall Arts Center has been working with the developer of the property at Santa Fe and Mineral. And the sort of conceptual drawings of what that might look like are the top two in that packet. We believe this is an ideal location for our second facility for a number of reasons. Not only does it provide ample space for our immediate square footage needs, but it has excellent proximity, including and access to where we are currently. It's just straight down Santa Fe a few miles. It has ample parking, including bus parking and drop-off areas. Right now, when the school buses come or the senior citizens come from some of the retirement centers, they have to slow down and put the blinkers on in the left lane on Main Street and then exit into the street and come around the buses to come, which is not an ideal situation for anyone to be out on Main Street when things are going. It's along the light rail corridor, which will provide easy access for our guests from the north, as well as easy access by automobile from visitors that we have coming from Jefferson and Douglas counties. I think THAC will also be an outstanding amenity for the many new residents that will be part of that development in the long run, and also draw clientele to the businesses and restaurants which will be located there. Now, in order to make this whole thing happen, Town Hall Arts Center is ready to contribute the following. So we're prepared to launch and execute a capital campaign of nearly $4 million in order to remodel the historic downtown location. We want also prepared to increase our operating budget by approximately $450,000 a year to accommodate the additional staff, utilities, and other expenses that are associated with having an annex or a second location. I just want to let you know also THAC has raised substantial capital funds to provide the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the second space. So our ask for the council is to work with us side by side as we negotiate to secure the best lease possible. Between both of our influences, we think they'll be inclined more to cooperate and give us the best price possible. We'd like you to financially support a 10-year lease that the developer would like to have signed this summer. The lease would be signed with the understanding that it's contingent on the city's financial support. So if it, for some reason, doesn't get in the budget, then the lease is, would be null. Based on the facility the developer has presented to us, the first offer from the developer is $31 per square foot. And that is supposedly at least a $2 a square foot discount that he calls his nonprofit discount. The unnegotiated lease cost at this price would be approximately $450,000 per year. We have engaged some of our supporters to help us figure out ways to get that cost down. That $450,000 is an unnegotiated price. It's just him saying this is what it goes for. We've had some of our supporters that have come up with some ideas like proposing the developer cut the per square footage cost and give it as a gift to THAC, that would give them a nice, large nonprofit tax write-off.
Sharon?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I am going to ask if we can discontinue the conversation about the potential of an opportunity on that property. And the reason is, it is a quasi-judicial matter at this point. The developer has put in an application with the city and going through the city process to bring it to a rezone. And so I think that in honor of being as fair as possible about our decision-making when the time comes, I think that it would be best if this conversation, and I understand that you said you'd like a summer thing, I can assure you, we will not and cannot, in my opinion, Mark, you can correct me, legally make any commitment to you about that property at this point.
Okay.
And anything that can be done there, because we have not seen it in the official capacity of the rezone. So I think just to make sure that we all stay safe, err on the side of the greatest caution. So go ahead and continue, and we know that that's sitting there and that would need to be a revisit.
Well, to meet our timeline, which is to get these things all done by the end of 2020, and to provide the additional programming and everything, that one was the location that would be ready the soonest, but I understand it's got to go through a lot of processes before that. So wherever we end up trying to go, we've looked at several locations. The other ones are either no parking or too far away, still within Littleton, but too far away, but I'm sure we can, keep looking and see what opportunities are out there. So now I think, Denise, I'll leave it back to you to open it for questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Council, any questions?
So I think last time you were here, we were talking, it was more about storage. It seems like now in the last 2-3 years, it's turned into a much bigger project. Is that right?
No,
I think what came to us before was looking that you just outgrew where you were and needed, for sets and
Yes.
design and smaller classes.
yes, storage is a small part of it. We've always been looking for a dedicated rehearsal space, a spot for our shop to move to, administrative space as well. JD, is there, you were here at the last presentation.
Thank you. There's two numbers that we talked about tonight, 12,000 square feet and 16,000 square feet. The 12,000 square feet is what we identified as a need in 2015. That includes administrative, education, rehearsal, shop, technical, which includes 2,000 square feet of storage. Currently, and at that time, we have 4 storage units throughout the city. Now we have 5. This project would consolidate those, and that certainly is part of that technical space. So that need hasn't gone away. It's just not quite as much fun to talk about.
Other questions?
Can I get some perspective as to what we pay, the city pays to support Town Hall Center? Does Tiffany have that, or do we know?
$38,500.
$38,500 a year? And that's for what? What's that go to?
It's an operating cost,
Okay.
operating expenses.
And do we know, JD, do we know your revenues then? You guys are pretty self-sufficient over there.
Yeah, you give $38,500 in addition to the space which the city owns.
Right, which is home free and clear.
And we do all maintenance on that space, as I recall, a while back, we did
All-
about $1.5 million worth of air conditioners on top.
Yeah, all facility maintenance, we do all programming maintenance, so lights and sound, etc. Our operating budget is 1.4.
Okay, good. And, I love the new drawings. Is there anything historical with inside the building that is worth preserving, keeping? I've been in there 100 times, but I can't think of anything.
The only thing, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
The only thing protected is the facade.
Right, right.
Interior, if you dig the 80s, yes. We don't plan to keep anything that's not part of the facade. So the arched windows, the glass all stays. The In fact, our plans include opening up the second floor windows so that they can be more accessible.
Sure.
And appreciate that architecture more than we do now. But no, there's nothing inside that's of particular interest or historical value from our understanding. I'm sure there are people that would perhaps have a different opinion.
Questions? Carol? Karina's first.
Can you, we've talked about the investment that we as a city are making into the Town Hall Arts Center, or have up until now, but there's also a return that's coming from that. I know that the businesses downtown benefit. Can you talk a little bit about the return on that investment for the community? Do you have any numbers to share at this time?
What was the other slide?
Yeah. JD, did you want to?
Yeah, so we don't have any firm dollars or cents. We have worked with the CBCA, the Colorado Business Community for the Arts, to understand overall how arts and arts organizations impact the state economy, but they don't provide numbers that drill down to specific sites in specific cities. And we don't have the sophistication to come before you and give a solid number that we could really cite and say with assurance. We do know that 53% of our audience sometimes or always or regularly go and have a meal in the area before a show. We know that 42,000 people visit our theater every year. So you could pencil together some math. I'm a parent. I drop my kid off for class. I go next door to NT. I go down the street to Dirt Coffee. So those types of things are not numbers that we can necessarily be certain with, but from what we understand from the businesses downtown, they are not only supporters of us when it comes to advertising and sponsorships, but we have a tremendous relationship with them, and without speaking for them, I think they would be less than thrilled to see us not exist in the downtown space.
Well, I have talked to some of the local businesses down there, and they've talked about how their volume spikes, unexpectedly, and then they realize, oh, there is a show going on tonight. So I've definitely experienced that myself, and I think where we see the arts in any community, it becomes a destination, so it's a reason to go, and then the value comes from, beyond the experience that you're having there, but the experience you're having in the area.
Carol? I'm concerned about money. So I heard Tiffany say 38,000 roughly goes to the existing town hall center. And you're proposing building? Is this a picture of a new building?
It is a second building, not replacing what's
Right.
downtown, an additional space.
So then would you be expecting Littleton to double, triple what we're paying, the 38,000?
Substantially more than that.
Substantially more money, so we would need to budget.
400,000.
Well, the 400,000 was for the lease, 450,000 was for the lease for the building. So we have 450,000 for the lease, and then 38,000 was for the current facility staff.
If you're looking at, let's say the 16,000 square feet and you can get it at 32, that's $500,000 a year lease. $512,000 is what they'd be asking for. $500,000 a year.
$500,000 a year. And you have a budget of 1.4 million. Where does that money come from?
Ticket sales, donations, sponsorships, advertising in the programs.
Okay.
SCFD.
What would your budget expand to with this new building?
Increase it around $450,000.
Plus another 38,000 or so for staffing.
Well, no, that budget is part of what we're saying we're going to cover.
Oh, okay, I just heard you say it was 450,000 a year for the lease.
For operating increase, operating income.
Operating income.
Staffing and utilities and maintenance.
That's a significant ask.
Well, as we stated, that's what they have presented to us. We have not started any negotiation because obviously.
And they is,
The developer.
so the developer is in charge of this?
Of the of the development, and of which we would need to concur.
They would build a facility. I believe they would build a facility, and we would simply lease it from them. City would.
If I may. Vision 2025 was a abstract thought, meaning we developed it without any specific site or building in mind. Throughout the last couple of years, we have been approached by multiple developers and building owners that have really presented 4 unique spaces that would check off all of our major boxes. Each space has pros, each space has cons. As we've continued to build up our fundraising capacity and the excitement within our own base, we felt this was an appropriate time to come to the city to ask for a public partnership, private partnership for this type of thing. Strike while the iron's hot, if you will. So this particular developer, based on their $32 or $31 per square foot and our 16,000 square foot need, puts our ask of the city at $450,000 to $500,000. In addition, I'm sorry.
512,000.
Yes. In addition to that, to the city partnering with us in obtaining the space, we would then increase our operating budget independent of that by an additional $450,000. That covers utilities, it covers staffing, it covers some programming, it covers the things we would need to operate that second space. We've also committed $150,000 that we have currently already raised towards the outfitting of that new building once it's designed, and we're prepared to undertake a capital campaign on our own to remodel the downtown facility. So this is a major undertaking on multiple fronts, both physical and operational and programmatical.
Hold on a second.
Certainly.
When I do the math, I may have done it wrong, but when I multiply 31 square feet, $31 per square feet times 16,000 square feet, I come up with $496,000, which is almost $500,000 just for the square footage. And then in addition to that, you need to furnish it and staff it.
And we'll
So-
pay for the furnishing and the staffing.
Oh, you're just asking us for the lease.
That's right.
Just to, like, the current situation is to provide for the venue, this would be provided for, the city provide for a new venue. That's pretty much it.
Exactly.
Shouldn't we just be focusing on downtown and not this new facility because of semi-quasi-judicial?
Well, no, this is just a new facility, who cares where it is?
Right, I understand.
Yeah, I think, let's just try to be as careful as we can about that. I mean, I think that we're not going to make a decision this evening about this.
We can't
I
anyway.
think that, no,
Study session.
that's right. Good job, Jared.
Details.
But I think that you guys have asked, you've wanted to get in front of council with this for some time, and so this is a great opportunity. A couple things I want, you go ahead, go first.
So is there a possibility of focusing on, if a second site doesn't happen, does that mean renovation of the downtown site doesn't happen?
If we cannot move the administrative, educational, rehearsal, and technical spaces out of the downtown building, then we cannot realize the renderings that you see and some of the programming that we've explained tonight. That square footage is currently occupied by those functions. We have explored moving the shop to one space and rehearsal to another, education to multiple spaces, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't found the right pieces of that puzzle, and to be perfectly honest with you, the organizational and cultural shifts that I think would come by fracturing the staff into multiple places would harm our final product, perhaps more than just continuing to operate at the high level and the quality that we do now until we can really make this complete package come together.
What does Town Hall Arts Center look like in 5 years? Say there is no second site.
I think by then, if we don't replace the chairs on the second floor, our patrons will revolt. But other than that, to be perfectly honest, we're going to continue to expand education in every way we can, in multiple sites. We're in 49 schools. We'd love to get into every school in around Douglas, Jefferson County. We're going to continue to grow this in any way we can, but the overall product and the impact to the citizens of Littleton as they experience Town Hall in either one or multiple sites will not be as dramatic. And I think that as time goes on, the talent that this region has will continue to go to other cities and other venues such as Pace, Lone Tree, Aurora, Arvada, Lakewood, some of those other facilities that are a little more sexy, if you will allow the term.
I don't think we're into public sex.
Sorry.
It's a joke.
A bad joke.
Hey, George?
So, I appreciate the circumstances you guys are in, and I think that I don't think there's any disagreement that it's a treasure for downtown, it's a treasure for Littleton. Town Hall Arts Center, the quality of work that comes out of there, I think surplants all the local theaters, and they may be more sexy, but they are not better. They do not do better performances. They do not have that quality that comes out of here, and that's not just me saying that. And so I think you guys have a very, very, very strong product. It's very unfortunate that you're kind of in a situation where this is kind of stacked up, where you haven't been able to kind of process over a number of years and slowly move into something. And the timeline that you've got over there is really, really aggressive. We're used to aggressive timelines, but that's really aggressive. So a couple things I just wanted to leave you guys with. Number one, the ask regarding the other facility based on where you are looking at it now, and the developer that you're working with, that is all going to have to go on hold until we've gone through our process. And then at that point, and I'm saying this tonight, if we get different information back from a city attorney that says we can start talking about this at this point, then we will reopen up conversations and have staff communicate back and forth with you on that. But in terms of the budget, I don't know that the timing is going to get that on the 2020 budget. And the ask is so enormous that it would be very difficult for us to put that in as a placeholder, and it would also be very difficult for us to revisit that sometime again in 2020. The money at this point would need to come out of our general fund. And if you guys have been watching at all, we are dealing with challenges with the general fund. We've actually had to go into our reserves to pay for things that we need to take care of. Because it needs to come out of the general fund, which we have to do a balanced budget. So at the end of our budget in January, when we bless, or December, we bless it, it's balanced. So then if something else comes along, we got to figure out where to get that money. And so because we do have a reserve, we're able to do that. But we don't, tapping deeper into the reserve, it will put us into a jeopardy. And I think that that's something that we already have a bit of trepidation about where we're at now. A couple other thoughts, though. We are, and we will be talking later this evening about opportunities at the ballot for finding additional revenue sources. And one of those that we have talked about, and we're going to talk more about it tonight, and we've got some timing that we need to consider if we want to make this happen. So one of those revenue sources is a lodging tax, which would be a tax that would be applied to our hotels in town. And typically those taxes are more palatable to the lodging industry if they tie back to something that creates tourism or creates interest that would bring people into the lodging world. So Town Hall, I think, seems to me, in my logic, would be something that would be appropriate for that. The other opportunity that we have in terms of being able to support things like the arts would be a ticket tax. Most municipalities do a ticket tax. Most people that have active art and culture or concert programs and those types of things, maybe it's $1, maybe it's $2, maybe it's 50 cents. But that's another opportunity, and that money that is dedicated, so it doesn't come out of our general fund. We're not trying to trade potholes for, arts and culture, which can be an interesting political challenge. But then it's dedicated, and then you guys have an idea of exactly what the flow of that money is. Those, in my opinion, would probably be a better way for us to help fund you. But again, those are conversations we need to have about whether we are going to the ballot, and if we are, what does that start to look like, and how do we commit that money out? There's a lot of people who have an ask on us in terms of helping with things like this, and much of it has fallen into the arts and culture community. I've asked Councilmember Elrod to start thinking about putting together kind of an arts and culture commission where we would be able to, if we do have these additional funding sources, that commission would be one of those that would help source that and fund that out and keep an eye on it, those types of things. So it's on our plate, it's in our mind, we're thinking about it, but you can see it's big. I like to call them chunky monkeys. It's a lot of moving parts. But I think it shows opportunity, it shows potential. Does it match your timeline? No, it doesn't. But that's kind of what I can tell you this evening. Again, to tell you also that we obviously appreciate the Town Hall Arts. We continue to support it. I have asked Tiffany if maybe we could put together what we have contributed over the last 5 years or so on maintenance, because that's one of the other considerations that I have regarding supporting a second building, which we wouldn't own, we would just be paying rent on. We still own this building, and it continues to get older every day. And we know there's things that need to be done, and even after a renovation, interior. So those are a lot of things that, thank you for bringing that up. It's something we could start working on and get some numbers put together and keep this kind of moving on a trajectory for you. Councilmember Elrod.
I think what's important for us to convey is our support of the strategic plan. Our involvement and how we help you execute upon that. As Debbie just said, there's different ways we can get to the funding and things that we need to consider. But I do think it's important that as a council that we are committed to the arts in the community. We recognize the value of the Town Hall Arts Center and that investment that our predecessors made to say, we are donating this building for this purpose. That's the ask that you're asking for us now, is to continue to invest in the Town Hall Arts Center beyond just the downtown. So I think it's important that we as a council are committed to that strategy for not only the Town Hall Arts Center, but also for our community. And then go through the right processes that we need to as we talk about what does funding look like. How can we create a source of funding to help us be successful?
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys a lot. Thanks for coming in and sharing your plans, and we will definitely be back in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. The next item of business is a Tri-Cities IGA for homelessness assessment. Mark, how do you want to handle?
Sorry.
That's okay, were you leaving? What do you think?
Do it 5 minutes.
Are we taking a break?
Well, they're grabbing their.
Break?
Yeah, do it myself. I could use a break personally.
All right,
Yeah.
we'll do a 5-minute break, be back at 7:15.
Okay.
Our next item is a discussion about the Tri-Cities IGA for homelessness assessment. As you guys know, we have a commission, Tri-Cities Commission, that's working on the issue of homelessness. So it's Sheridan and Inglewood and Littleton, and Carol is our representative on that. And I believe that the commission has engagement of the law enforcement from all three municipalities, from the city manager of the municipalities, and then you call in occasionally. Other resources as needed, meeting once a month.
Yeah, and we have regular, also representatives from All Health Network that does the ride-alongs always with the police when there is mental health issues expected, and they also deal with homeless. Yeah.
Turn it over to you, Carol.
Well, this topic is about saving the city's money. Right now, we have what I call a reactive deliverance of services, meaning we don't know what's coming at us or why, but we deliver services such as hospitalization and emergency and all kinds of things. Police, jails, and those cost, if you look at that sheet of paper that doesn't have any color on it, average of $35,000 per homeless person, typically of a municipality. So that's a lot of money that's completely out of our control and unitemized. Emergency, for example, moving down past the middle of the page, is frequent users of emergency departments of homeless people because they don't have any other place to go sometimes. I'm sick, I need some help. 5 times per year, roughly $18,500. Is that right? $18,500. And then when a homeless person is more likely to be admitted to the hospital because they don't have a place to send them after emergency treatment. And then they're likely to stay longer because there isn't a place for them to be released to for home care like the rest of us. So these ends up...
And they often get released anyway, out into the...
Eventually.
Yeah.
Gonna be. So the whole idea here is to save taxpayers money through saving the municipalities money by having a management plan of dealing with homelessness. In order to be able to manage anything, you have to quantify it. You have to know what it is you have. And so that's the reason for proposing a survey by the Burns Center at BU. Burns Center specializes in poverty and homelessness, so they know a lot about the topic. They did a survey for Trinidad. I waved this in front of you a few months ago. So things we wouldn't expect, but were the fact in Trinidad was mental health issues, 56% of the people they found homeless had mental health issues. So expecting those persons to solve their own problem, which is not having a home, by getting a job isn't going to fix the problem, even though we can say that would be a good idea. That's just one example. This is the one that strikes me the most. Causes for heat stroke, causes for hospitalization and emergency visits, heat stroke. Heat stroke. That's a big price to be paying, emergency room or hospitalization for heat stroke. This survey, the Trinidad, was for 63 interviewees. So we have 100 hospitalizations and 100 emergency room visits. We don't know what we have, but it would be good to find out and why, and then hopefully we can get under that whole thing and treat the causes and get those reduced rather than reacting to, here's a person passed out on the street, they get taken to the emergency room, they get admitted for 3 days, and then put back out in the street. And then we get to do it again. So, Mark? You want to talk about this?
Yeah, just adding my own perspective, sitting in on some of the Tri-City discussion, I think it is about trying to understand the problem. So the purpose of this IGA is kind of a three-way split between the cities to do this survey assessment, kind of in a couple of pieces. If you read the document, there's kind of this first phase, which is kind of the interview of the actual homeless people out of the field, so to speak. The other piece is kind of this family assessment here. That we would be working with school districts. I have had a conversation with Brian Ewert, the superintendent of LPS, and they have agreed to participate in that. They see the value of that. We have to, obviously, they've got their own confidentiality rules there we'd have to honor, but they see the value in participating with us. I also had a very interesting conversation with the CEO of Littleton Hospital today. They obviously see the impact, as Councilor Fay kind of touched on. And so it comes right into the front door, right into the emergency room, and he was ecstatic really to want to participate in our process, including bringing some resources to this if at all possible. I didn't hit him up with exactly how much, but I think he sees. Yeah, so I think he definitely sees it's part of their mission as a hospital is obviously trying to reduce the kind of the cost of patient care, and there's kind of a larger impact to the health system here, nationally. So what we're experiencing here locally is obviously a national problem. I think what's also important to kind of state here is none of the three cities are asking really to get into the social service programs themselves. We see that as others, the county, nonprofits, faith-based, whatever it might be. And so we are looking to perhaps a model that is fairly typical nationally here where we might coordinate, we might facilitate, but we're not looking to add more cost, more services here for that purpose.
Right, we're looking to reduce our costs.
Correct.
Not to spend more.
Yes, and I think what's also been really kind of fascinating listening to the Tri-City group is how our police departments of the three cities are kind of getting engaged in this thing. So, obviously as a council member and even myself as the city manager, I don't get to see that interaction on a regular basis. But now I have a much better understanding of what they're facing. And in our particular case, we have a contract with All Health Network, and so they are partnering with our police officers. So when we engage the homeless, they are there, and we have a lot of it, to be honest. And so I think it's time. I hear a lot of comments from our citizens asking us to, we got a problem, want the city to do something. And so I think this is really the first step, as Councilor Fay states, is inventory, assess. Let's understand what is the problem so we can figure out what the management plan is.
One of the things I like about what the Burns does is that they don't do kind of this traditional moment in time homeless study, which by the time you get that study processed through our system and try to create some sort of policy around it, that moment in time was a year ago or so. This study, I think, seems to me that it would have a lot more substance for us to be able to evaluate kind of more key points that would then enable us to look at policy decision-making, look at how we provide services, how partners that we get involved in this, how the school can do things differently, the hospitals do things differently, and how we're all working together to make that happen and not this independent behavior, which we all know that cooperation and working together, we get things done a lot cheaper, a lot faster, and a lot better. So I think it's an excellent opportunity.
Carol? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we have any idea between the three cities how many people we think we have homelessness? Especially since they just moved that one camp out of Inglewood, or at least shut her down.
When we moved a camp out of Littleton, did that turn out to be Centennial?
I think it's a little of both, but mostly Centennial out of the county line. Right. Kind of alert you to that. We're still in the process of cleaning that one up. But,
Kind of addressing that, the point-in-time study, the one that's done in January, I think came up with
180.
People in the three cities.
108?
80, I think, was Arapahoe County.
I don't remember.
Anyway,
Okay, I was just trying
under
to-
200 people.
Okay.
which
It's
we
probably.
all know that's not true.
It's probably not true. And what they were counting was people who were findable on a January night, pretty much outside. So that didn't include a lot of families, like would be couch surfing. They would be homeless, they're moving from this place to this place, they wouldn't be counted probably. People know when the count's going to be, and so they might be really hard to find. So the point in time is, it was a great place to start, but it doesn't give us enough information really to do very much. So all of this information here on both sides is about 68 people. So you could have the number 68 people, or you could have this information. Which one could you address the problem with? Probably more likely having some numbers of.
Well, Trinidad's only a town of 8,500 people, too.
Yeah.
So it's a small town.
Yeah.
So the financial ask is 107,000,
For the three cities.
3 cities for both phases. How is that being divided up?
Divided up equally.
Is it equally?
1.3.
Well, I mean, you know, Sheridan's tiny, Littleton's bigger.
That's how they're doing it.
I know, that's what I was asking.
Though Sheridan has a much bigger load on their school system.
Right, that's my next.
And Inglewood, there's all kinds of way to slice it, so we just decided, let's just share.
And have we approached any others, you know, any of the hospitals, not just Littleton, but, you know, Porter or Swedish?
I talked to Meryl's, and she has met with Swedish and Craig. Both have committed support. They've not given a dollar number. Craig has said that, yes, absolutely, and it will be money. Swedish has says, yes, that they will contribute some support resources. They have, and she told them, I need to know Monday. So she's given them a deadline. I've reached out to Commissioner Sharp, and I've shared this information with her, and I've asked her if Arapahoe County would pay for half of the whole study, and then each of our municipalities would pay for a third of that other half. And that she was very, very, very interested in helping us with this. They've got kind of a weird calendar where they don't meet again until next week. They've missed 2 weeks with some conference and stuff like that. So she is reaching out to a number of places where they may have some funding, pockets of grant money and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we'll hear back from her, but she definitely felt like this was something that the county would want to support.
And I definitely, you know, think this is a worthwhile endeavor here. I'm just trying to think of other stakeholders who would benefit
Oh, yeah.
from
Well, the
this.
schools and the
schools,
hospitals.
you know, urban drainage, South Suburban. I mean, that they would be impacted as well. So I wonder if we can figure out, you know, brainstorm as many people as we can bring to the table.
Do you want to talk about timing on this?
Timing, sure. Well, we're proposing to start the study of the individuals as soon as we can get the money, and that will go for 8 months. And then when school starts in August, to start the survey of families, since that's when kids show up in the schools. And we expect that with the reaction that we've gotten from the schools, that we'll get a lot of support from them on knowing where the kids are, at what schools. And then, of course, it's up to the parents to be willing to participate in the survey.
Is this, would this be an example of the output that would come? Oh, this was done by them? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is like the qualitative, it kind of provides the color to, like you said, just the numbers. So the numbers tell you one thing to give you a sense of size, but this tells you impact or potential impact.
So since you brought up Craig Hospital, which specializes in brain injuries, we can see here in Trinidad, at least, that 23%, almost 24% of their interviewees had brain injuries. So that's a quarter. And if Craig had treatment to offer for a quarter of the homeless and could reduce the homelessness simply by helping them deal with their brain injuries, we might be well on to a solution there.
Do you know what Trinidad has done with this information?
They have, number one, they're really pleased with their results. they have reduced the amount of people being homeless. And I don't have a concrete number on that. And the person who talked to them was Mayor Olson from Inglewood. And so what I got from what she brought back to us is they are really pleased with what they got out of it.
It also says on here that not everybody who they encountered would agree to be interviewed, so.
Yeah. You know, my wife's family's from Trinidad, and they're really involved with the whole city. And I'd like to maybe reach out to the mayor down there or council and just ask them sort of what they're doing with this information, how they're, you know, what it means to the city. Because I was just down there 2 weeks ago for a golf tournament. And, you know, I saw the homelessness, and I've talked a lot about it with my brother-in-law and, you know, what they're dealing with, similar to what we're dealing with. You know, people camping out along the river and stuff like that. You see the same people on the corners, you know, panhandling and stuff like that. So if it'd be all right if I could do that, just
Yeah, I think
get
that's
some
fine.
feedback and I'll give it back to Carol.
Yeah. One of the things I thought interesting on here was reasons for homelessness, and we hear this consistently, and it sounds silly, but the reason they're homeless is they don't have a home.
Exactly.
And so almost 52% were unable to pay their rent. And they, you know, there was a story the other day where they were talking about different things with homelessness, and they said that there's something like, I'm not even going to try to quote the percentage, but it was over 50%, are literally 1 month away from being homeless. So it's a loss of a job, it's a catastrophic illness, it's a something or another, and then you cannot pay the rent, and you know, renters, leaseors are no longer, you know, they're not that generous with giving you extra time. I know in the facility that apartment building, feels like
At least you're
that
safe.
they have a policy that if you are 1 day late with your rent, the sheriff puts an eviction notice on your door.
Oh,
So you have a 3-day grace period, but if you're 1 day, if you pay on the 4th instead of the 3rd.
No, they
the
have,
sheriff-
then they're not following the law. First, you have to do a notice that they have to demand for rent. 10 days later, then the sheriff puts out a notice. It's not the second day of the month.
Put it up, if the rent is not paid by the 3rd, there's a
A
notice on the
demand for
door.
rent, but that's not by the sheriff.
No, it was Douglas County Sheriff, it was right up there. So, I mean, that I think would help in terms of us with our housing study, with some of the stuff we're doing in terms of how to help with, just as a municipality, to be able to keep, there's some level of affordability in housing. I mean, if you can, affordable housing seems a much better option than homelessness. Karina and then Jerry.
Do you, in your discussions, is this information that is going to help us, assess policy or services that are out there to actually prevent the homelessness? So take more of a preventive role as opposed to then a recovery, because preventing is a lot less expensive and is much more successful than trying to turn around the situation. So is this information that's going to be usable from that perspective?
Exactly.
Jerry.
I guess before I'm willing to commit funds, I want to find out, I think, Patrick, you're right, that's one of the notes I
Alluding to it. Keep going.
One of the notes I made was that, what have others done with this information? I mean, it's great to talk about it, but Denver has spent over $60 million on their 10 years in homelessness, and it's a lot worse now. Colorado Coalition, their budget is well over $70,000 just on expenses. We're going to get a study that's going to probably not be unlike this.
I agree.
But the idea of just doing a study, I think we do need to do something with the Tri-Cities as well as Arapahoe County to how are we going to handle moving these folks or helping them. I'd rather spend the money on helping them and doing another study, because the study's not going to tell us a whole lot new. And I think you had mentioned a while back, you had mentioned to me about the schools that they're dealing with the homeless kids, and that's always a big problem. They're probably going to have a whole new batch of kids this year that they've never seen before, and the ones that they did see are gone. Where they went to, who knows? I would rather strategize on what do we want what is our police departments all doing in Arapahoe County? What are they doing? I want to find out what are we doing first? And then, is it the right thing, or do we need to do something else? I want to do something that's going to be effective besides just spending money on another report that's going to give us information that's not unlike what I would expect in the first place.
I couldn't agree more. We know approximately how many people we have. You can look at this, I don't think it's gonna be much different than.
Well, I don't think this is the whole report either.
Well, I agree.
This is a pretty picture.
I get that.
Probably.
But I don't think it's gonna be much different. I really don't. I don't care if it's Trinidad or Texas or, it doesn't matter. I think these are your demographics of why people are homeless and what they're struggling with. And I'll try to reach out to Trinidad this week and see what they can give us some feedback to say, okay, now you have this information, what are you doing with it? And see if we can come to some, because of $107,000, what can we do with that money to
Well, it would be
improve their.
a max of 35 to Littleton.
Right, I understand, but I'm talking all three cities and with all the hospitals and everybody getting involved. Now, if that's what they need, if our partners are saying, I need to know what we're dealing with in the three cities, then I'm all for it. But if we're just saying, let's do the study.
This study is, I just
DU
Googled it,
does
it's a
a lot of
76-page report.
Sure.
And DU does do a lot of studies. I'd like to see what are the results they're getting from people that are getting these studies.
Yeah, maybe it's a good conversation to have with DU. Yeah.
Karina?
And there's a couple of parts of this, of the holistic picture as well. So you have mentioned to me that you've asked Ken Feldman to take a look at our policies. So that's still something that, would be something we consider. Like, what is our current policy on this? Is there something that we can do from a policy perspective that maybe we haven't addressed? And then there's also, just as this is an inventory and assessment of the population, I don't believe we have an inventory and assessment of the various services and programs and organizations that are out there. And I know that is a gap as well, that, individuals don't even know what services are available. So to me, if we were to pursue something like this, I think it has to be in that bigger picture of, we're doing a study because with this study we're going to be able to do this, and I'd be more comfortable talking about that through a 2020 budget and create a line item, because we know that this investment doesn't stop at $150,000. Not unlike what we do when we do a study of how much is a playground going to cost. We'll pay the $40,000 for that to then spend $200,000. So I'd rather, instead of pulling it from a budget now, just because we have it, I guess, in a council projects budget, I'd rather have a conversation on priority-based budgeting or a 2020 budget process and say, this is something that we're committing to as a city and a community, and plan it out that way.
Kyle?
Can I just follow up on that? So what would the city of Littleton do with this information?
Well, I think it's difficult to answer that because the whole purpose of this is to have enough data for us to kind of look at what are the core issues behind being homeless, and how do we distribute that back out to the existing list of services that we have in our community. And remember, these are not our services. These are largely faith-based or the county. And I think to the credit of the Tri-Cities, they have invited into this conversation here All Health Network, faith-based groups. There's a lot of activity that occurs behind the scene that the cities never get to see. And I think so in trying to develop some kind of a strategy, we can't see it yet, in part because we don't have enough information about how many people and why. Yes, it may end up being very similar to that, what you see there, but I think, and I certainly would be more than willing to go to these communities and give examples of how they've used the information. But in the end, we can't have a strategy until we get that kind of data for our community. And the other thing, too, that's kind of important to remember is the Tri-Cities, the common thread is the South Platte River. And so they move up and down that corridor largely. Yes, they have homeless in other parts of the state. And light rail, yes. And so those two pieces make us, the Tri-Cities, rather unique. So what we do in one community Tri-City Group has clearly discussed, we need to be consistent among the three, including law enforcement. And so that's been the initial conversation. But law enforcement is just a very small piece of this problem, and how they deal with it is very inefficient. So we recognize that they see it at one level, and it moves it over to a different piece of it, at least temporarily. And it costs a lot of money to go through our police systems, through the jail, through the county, and then eventually back on the street. That is the cycle of typical homelessness, where the police get involved. So we're trying to divert that. We're trying to obviously look for strategies where, quite honestly, they're not involved. In fact, there was a very fascinating article, I think somebody shared, where, I'm trying to remember exactly who shared that. One of you did. Where there's another community that, I remember, it was Eugene, Oregon. That, maybe I didn't share this, I'm sorry, it came from staff, but Eugene, Oregon, for the last 30 years have come up with a system where they have basically non-profits and faith-based that get involved before really the police have to take their action. And they are now a pilot project within the city and county of Denver. So these are the kinds of strategies, quite honestly, nationally, where this is.
You're talking an outreach program?
Yes.
Colorado Coalition's been doing that for 30 years.
Well, now city and county and Denver are trying to mirror what's going on in Eugene, Oregon at a very different
they
level.
communicate a lot.
Yeah, so I think, the bottom line is, this is going to be a very difficult problem that we will always be dealing with. And so I think if we can bring other players to the table here and certainly financially participate, then I think we just have the chances of success in the long run will be higher. So the hospitals, the county are clearly two major players.
I think having as many stakeholders involved rather than just 3 cities, because that's not going to.
No,
we're
pursuing it.
Yeah, we need to have the hospitals, the county, the South Suburban, urban drainage, schools.
There are a lot of assumptions about what's going on with homelessness. One of them that Randy and I were talking about is, are there people who are homeless because they choose to be? And that's a very popular belief. And so we asked the All Health Network gal, is that true? And she said, yes, it's true. And there are 2 main reasons why people choose not to be sheltered. Because there are shelters available that people turn down. Number 1 is they have a dog. So this picture was put out by the homelessness in the parks that was done by, that was a meeting last fall. So if a person has a dog, they can't stay in a shelter. And they have no place to put the dog. And like us, they love their dog. And this picture shows it so nicely, I'll pass it around. The blanket is over the dog.
There was actually a news story recently where a city recognized that that was part of one of the big problems. They created a shelter for the dogs, so the dog would stay in that shelter so that the homeless person could get off the street too. So that was one of those things where they realized a data point and they were able to solve it.
That's an example of why a study or a survey could be really useful. So if we found out that whatever percentage of our unsheltered people who are out camping, our citizens don't want them. So that's really what we're trying to solve, is get people out of places where it isn't good to see them. And if that percentage is high and a solution would be to deal with the dogs, then we have a completely different picture. Then we need more shelters. Another one was that some people choose not to be in a shelter because they have been attacked in a shelter. And so men, women, finding out things like that could be useful. And for services, part of the group is pastors, two pastors that both run faith-based organizations. One is called Change the Trend. I think that's fairly well known. And they say they have a lot of services and a lot of volunteers. But the challenge is actually delivering services to the people who need them.
Okay. Karina?
So,
No, actually Jerry first and then Karina.
So-
We're gonna get a chance to go.
If we're just going to try to end homelessness here, it's never going to happen.
No,
If we-
and that's
May I?
not-
May I? That's what you would have done. I think what we need to do is focus on, are we going to worry about, concerned about the mentally ill, the drug addicts, dual diagnosed issues, the kids, because that's a huge issue. I think we're trying to eat the whole elephant. We got to, for $37,000, we're not going to get much for $37,000. We're going to get information we know. I think if we're looking for housing, then we need to talk about housing. If we're talking about mentally ill, we need to talk about mentally ill. Another report isn't just, if we're going to do something, let's do something worthwhile, but we're not going to be able to cure it all. So we can pick up a point. And the other day when you and I talked, it was about, the kids in the schools. That might be something we can be more effective at addressing.
Karina?
Carol, you said something. Oh, you made the comment that getting the services to the people. And so that was kind of my point that I made earlier, that this alone does not solve for it. And to me, homeless, and I know that's not the intent, but what I'm seeing is these other pieces are missing and haven't been brought to our attention. I do see that homelessness is going to be a program, an initiative that we need to commit to as a city within the region. And that's why, for me, I'd rather have a conversation, not of what is the strategy, but a commitment to, call this one of our goals and objectives from City Council for next year. And so that we can not only decide to do this, but also decide to do X, Y, and Z. What other information do we need? What other partners do we need to bring to the table? So to me, this is a point in time and tactical, and I think the responsible decision we need to make is to commit to this long term, and to me, that happens with the 2020 budget process.
Kyle?
To start the end of this discussion, I'll say, provided we have support from other stakeholders, the county and hospitals, I support this.
Just a couple comments. I actually almost have a completely different take on it than Karina does. And I appreciate Jerry's frustration with yet another study. But I think that what we have a responsibility to is certainly not solving homelessness. Certainly, we're not going to solve the problem. It needs to be there's a larger group that works to the solution of this. To Kyle's point about the partnerships and the fact that we have reached out to these people, and these people, kind of this quick broad stroke that we did, have all said absolutely yes, nobody's turned us down. 5-minute conversations. That's hard to get that much support that quick from these entities who are tight-fisted. But I think we play a special role, particularly the fact that we've created this Tri-Cities Commission on the homelessness, because when we started this commission, and I'm calling it a commission, but it may not, I don't know if we have an official name, but when we started it, the intention was because we knew that there was an encroaching problem, and we knew that all of our cities were getting some level of impact from it, and that's about all we knew. And we could have the cops come in and they could tell us their point in time or their things or the various things. But when we started talking to the cities, we realized that there is a kind of an overarching concern that this problem is more in dark corners than it always is visibly. You see the guys on the street corners, you see the camp they had to clean up. But there's a massive percentage that we don't see, they're not visible. Like, that's why they had the 68. I certainly would hope that we'd have a much larger sample for our data. But if we are going to if this commission is going to help lead an effort regarding homelessness, then it absolutely has to come from a place of knowledge of what are we really dealing with, and not speculating, and not what we saw on the news or this, that, or the other thing. The study, the fact that it's going to take so long to do, says that there will be a depth and there will be a value to it. I think that we can get in front of this and say, you need to talk to the South Suburban and find out what they're seeing, not just talk to the homeless, but talk to the hospitals, talk to these stakeholders that we're talking about, talk to each of the police. Our judge, when we had the judge in, and we're talking to him, and he said it is becoming a huge problem in municipal court. I mentioned that to Mayor Olson, and she said, yes, it is. We hadn't thought about that. We need to include that. And so what happens? What do we say to the judge? What do we say to the hospital? What do we say to the folks that are having this impact? We don't have anything to say because we don't know anything. And so the fact that they're hungry for the data, the fact that this is an institute that has found a value in creating this framework to do these studies, I really feel like we are we are doing the right thing. We are starting in the right place, because with homelessness, it's so easy to start on the street. It's so easy to start with some kind of quick policy here, there, the other thing. We've seen that not work all over the place. One of the things Inglewood has been dealing with is, why do these people what can we not do about that camping problem? And part of the problem is they spend a year trying to figure out who owned the property to even figure out what to do with it. Meanwhile, there's over 100 camps and close to 500 people down there. So we have to start at this place if we're going to be able to get deeper. The fact that it takes 8 months, I think that in my mind is a reason to move more quickly than slowly. The price of $107,000 gets split 3 ways. We get partners in here, the price goes down, 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 down. This is actually scheduled to go to a first read because we would need an IGA to be able to conduct this. I know that Inglewood and Sheridan both have it on their agendas. What I would ask council support for on this is that we are willing to move this to a first read, knowing full well that there's data that we want to process. What Trinidad may say, that we're waiting for some potential funding help, which would change the dollar amount. The IGA, I think, would agree to, we can change, they'll take any check. So move it to a first read, and I think what that says, as we go back and we talk to these folks, including Urban Drainage, including South Suburban, what that says to them is that is where our commitment is that we're ready to move it forward. We want their help, and we want their support, but that's how important it is to the city of Littleton, the city of Inglewood, and the city of Sheridan. We have a large voice together. Tri-Cities has been very effective, and I think that we are probably doing something right now that is not small. And in the long run, I think we're going to look back on this and be very proud of what this group was able to do, because there's a lot of really good work coming out of the group. I congratulate them for that. But that would be my ask, is that we move it to a first read. That would show up in July, because we don't have another meeting this month. That gives us plenty of time to get more work put together. It's on first read. We'll have a more dynamic council communication on it, but that would be, I guess that's my ask tonight. I'll go around the table and see if we have a consensus for that. Peggy, would you be okay?
Yeah, I can support that, David. Yeah, I think that's well said.
Jared?
No, that's the wrong report to do.
Kale? Karina?
I will support it, but I will be asking for additional information.
Well, that's what we're going to be providing, so.
Before,
Okay, we have
I'm
support.
sorry, there's a timing thing here. One of the other things that's coming in front of us is the grant funding for many services that support and can help the homeless. So this is the annual grant funding that we do. When is that happening? Because from my perspective, this is potentially a component of that. This is another, a way that we can spend that money to support these services. So my ask is that that becomes a consideration, that the source of funding may be from that grant, that bigger grant.
That process is scheduled for early September,
Part of the budget.
part of the budget. So you won't see that. This is, historically been our approach. You get the packet, and in that Saturday meeting towards the end, that's when you would get to see all the information.
But did we not put the question out that we need to establish some guidelines on what it is and how are we making decisions based on what? That was part of what we talked about last year. Now it sounds like we're just going back to what we did again.
No, at the retreat, if you'll remember, we talked through this issue. We did explore maybe some different ways, and in the end, we came back to a slightly modified version of what we've historically done. In fact, Sam and others have been working on kind of that process. And so we've been, in fact, I think it's been communicated out, we've been using this modified version. We are prepared to give you kind of a little bit of an update here, probably in July, I guess, where the status of some of that work. Yes, just kind of some of the changes in essence we put into the system.
So could this be part of that? I mean, does this fit into that criteria that you've come up with, Sama, that it could be funded through that? And so therefore, what I'm asking is, can this wait until September? Is there any reason why this can't wait until September?
Yeah, because that's about $80,000 that we distribute.
I don't think that system was designed to handle a request like this where we got a three-way partnership with three different cities.
And I think that in September, when we ratify that does not get concluded and ratified until October, then it is effective for 2020. It's not money that would be available in September. And also, we don't know what this dollar amount might end up. We're at 35. If we get the county to pay half, and we get $5,000 or $10,000 from everybody else, we may be, $7,000 or so, which we have in our council budget that we can put in there. And that also shows a great opportunity for us to share that data and work with these people on these levels. And so that's really the ask. And we have the support, we have enough consensus to take it to the first read. And we will work on
My
securing.
support of the first read is contingent on evaluating other funding avenues, whether that be grant funding or 2020 budget. So I just want to make sure I'm clear that I have an expectation that some of those options will be brought forward.
That is exactly what we just approved. Okay, good. Okay, we're going on to the next topic. Thank you very much for that. Leaving.
60 seconds.
60 seconds. Fast.
At Trinidad, oddly enough, the person heading this up, the primary contact would be the head librarian.
Okay.
And the library was involved because that's the center, like here.
issues. So this was something we were going to talk about a month ago, and then, oh boy.
Mayor Slayer pushed it down.
And this was just meant as, this is just the schedule. This isn't talking about any specific ballots. We're just talking about
We're talking about
the schedule.
what do you guys want to do about the ballot in 2019?
Right.
All right,
And this is what it's going to take.
Do we have, where's the schedule? I don't,
It's page 1.
oh, there it is, I'm sorry.
Continues on page 2.
Got it. So, a couple of things that and this is part of what, for discussion, for conversation, some of this is stuff that I'm gonna just throw out that you guys, are going to need to be considering probably in the future, and maybe not for 2019, but it's time to start thinking about it and talking about it. So let's go with the low-hanging fruit. A lodging tax. Clearly, we have heard from Town Hall, we know that there's some interest from Hudson Gardens. We know that there's interest from the Fine Arts Board. Obviously, there's a number of cultural interest in the community where there would be an opportunity for us to be able to support them with some funding. A lodging tax is a logical tax. We introduced this years ago. It was on the ballot. At the time, we only had one hotel, the Hampton Inn. It had sort of just opened. The sensitivity in the community was that they didn't want to ding the only hotel we had. So thankful to have it and just pleased that it was part of the community. Well, here we are, 6, 7 years later, and we now have 5 hotels. They are doing incredibly well, so well, in fact, that an event center was built near them. I live in that area, and there is a constant flow of walking traffic from those hotels to the event center and back and forth. There's those hotels, I think we can run numbers on them, but they stay, between 75 and 85% occupied, which is very, very good. Just down the road, not more than 5 minutes away, there's hotels in Highlands Ranch right off of Plaza Drive that accommodate a lot of the business travelers. And so they haven't seen any suffrage in business, and we haven't seen any suffrage. We do know that the businesses in our community are incredibly grateful. Kelly Nardi and I met with CenturyLink, and they did not realize that they were one of the greatest users of the hotel rooms in the hotels for business travel. And so I don't know that putting a tax on those would have any kind of detrimental effect. I think that there's a missed opportunity by us. So I think that there needs to be, number one, a conversation. Do we want to do that? If we do, how much do we want to do it? And should we put together some sort of plan for how that would be spent? I talked about that commission. I mean, what does that all look like? That's the first one.
What did we ask for last time?
I think it was 3%.
Was it 3? And I know it went down, but gosh, doing it again.
Wasn't this also in the community survey? This was asked, and it came back very positive that they would be supportive of it, both the citizen survey as well as the business survey.
Yeah.
I mean, 3% is even real low, too. I mean, Denver's what, 14, 15?
Yeah.
Really?
But
Yeah,
go to
Colorado
DC,
Springs
it's
is
like
10.
21.
Wow.
Grand Junction's, I think, 7.
But I think like Kevin said before, we just had that one new.
Right.
That now that we have several, it might be totally.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer.
It's also a tax that can be and should be applied to the Airbnbs and that type of thing. And so I think a couple things on that. So if you guys have an interest in it, then we need to get back very quickly. Yeah, this little chart's small.
Yeah. Expand it.
The latest possible study session to provide direction to the city clerk would be June 25th.
The next meeting.
And so that would be an opportunity for Tiffany to provide us some scenarios. If you did 5%, 7%, 8%, what would that look like? Gives us an opportunity to kind of maybe put together a process of how we would support if we decide the arts type of thing. Do you guys want to move that to September 25th?
Yes.
The other...
Start working, Tiffany. June
Break it up.
June 25th.
Break it up.
2 weeks.
Sorry, got down.
You
She's probably got a lot.
It's already done, probably.
She's got a lot.
Wanna do it right now? Get it done?
So the other option then, as we mentioned this evening with Town Hall, is a ticket tax. And so amongst those that would feel the impact of a ticket tax would be Alamo, would be Hudson Gardens, would be Town Hall Arts, would be anytime we would sell a ticket to a concert, it would be a $2 tax. It would be an event tax of sorts. So if you have to pay for a ticket to get into somewhere, the city has an excise tax of $1 or $2 or whatever. Any interest there?
Would you make it standard for going to a movie as opposed to going to a concert, or do you
It
base
would
it?
have to be across the board, all tickets.
So it's not a percentage, it's a
It's a fee. It's an exact dollar amount, so everybody would
It's not a fee,
pay
it's-
50.
Well,
Yeah, there's a difference.
but if it's a percentage versus a flat amount. I would be interested in learning more about it. I'm not saying that,
I would too.
Okay, let's put that on the study session for more info and be prepared.
The hotel one is definitely big.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
one's
yeah.
gotta go.
And I think for the study session too, let's be prepared that we have enough information for council that if we do want to move forward, we have the dollars. Okay.
One of the things I would be looking for at the ticket tax is to try to understand how much of that is our own citizens versus outside of our jurisdiction. Just to know what the burden may potentially be on citizens.
I bet it'd be a lot like what Town Arts gave us tonight. What was the numbers, were like 60% or something
Yeah.
like that, local and probably not.
And what those, if there's, what those fees, those taxes can be used, the revenues could be used for, if there's certain things to offset.
Right. To continue to support those.
Right, so that's just.
And it could be as little as 50 cents and, see what happens. And again, we're looking at this for 2019. If it's something that you're interested in, but you need more information or whatever, it can go to 2020. I think we just have to be conscientious that we can't go every year and ask for.
Like, that would go on the 19 ballot if we come up with an agreement, okay.
The other thing, and this is not ready for 2019, but this is something that council really needs to start having some conversations about, and I think that includes getting some polling going and figuring out the timeline on the planning and the preparation for consideration of a sales tax. I know it's an ugly word, I know everybody gets freaked out about it, I know it's very, very challenging for cities to actually raise their sales tax, but we have not done that. We have talked endlessly about the deficit we have in our capital projects. We are not seeing astronomical jumps in sales tax revenue, and we should not expect that. I think that there is an opportunity, as Karina pointed out before, the citizens have indicated in the feedbacks from the surveys that they would be willing to pay an additional sales tax in order to take care of some of these infrastructure needs. We have a list a mile long. It stretches from a pothole all the way to the service center, to the city building, to town hall, to the lodge at Geneva Village. We own something like 36 buildings. So that is something that the city can bond against. So you can, Sheridan did this recently. They got the transportation, they repaired all their roads. Their roads are at the highest level. They did it in fewer number of years, and they didn't spend the whole amount of money. They bonded against the tax, and they got it all done. That's satisfaction. That's going back to the citizens saying, this is how we're going to treat that money. And so that's something that you guys need to seriously start thinking about, talking about. I would suggest getting some kind of a campaign strategist, some kind of a pollster, where you can start talking about what that starts to look like, how you message that out, and then consider putting that on the 2020. 2019, we're nowhere near ready for that. But then look at the environment 2020. It's a national election, it's a presidential election. Is that a good time to go? And kind of start to weigh that stuff out. Because it's a big ask, but at one point Tiffany ran some numbers, and if we were to do, I think she did it very modest. Do you remember those?
Quarter 50.
Oh, she has them right there. Tiffany.
Prepared is her middle name.
So if we did a 1% increase, so going from 3% to 4%, it could bring about $11.8 million annually.
Are you projecting any Tabor funds this year? Excess?
I think that makes sense from a timing perspective too, because at that point, we would have gone through, we have our comprehensive plan, our economic development plan, and our transportation plan. So we have something to say, here's what we're predicting, here's what we're planning for, so it becomes a lot more tangible of where the need is, where the gap is, to say, is sales tax a solution to that? So I definitely think it's post that.
Yeah, and the Pell will be
What we're prepared to.
started too, so that will be good. And I think that part of it really is that messaging to the community. It's bringing them along. It's not throwing a tax at them. It's saying, this is what it will look like. And then we are going to go through this process, and it's going to be a public process. And we want you to come along
And a commitment of what we'll do with it, right?
Absolutely,
So
and a
it's
complete.
You know, that's what they expect is,
Complete
you
accountability.
know, we can support if we know what the return or the value of that is going to be.
Okay, so that would, I think, have, at the soonest would be 2020. Obviously, $11 million, I mean, the sooner you can do it, and that's just what that would bring in, and what you could bond against that. You could literally bond, pay for Santa Fe, and then pay it off through the sales tax and be all good.
Mayor, can I just add something quickly?
Yes, I know you have a large shopping list.
I know. I think just kind of adding to this, I think the council kind of sees this. The more we are specific about the intent of the sales tax, the more likely we are to be successful with our citizens. And I think the Pell, the PEL is going to begin this fall, so 2020 we'll have a lot more information. Council knows we were awarded $9 million in federal funds to kind of put the interim fix at Mineral in Santa Fe, but we don't even have the match for it. So that's another reason why, and once we explain this to our citizens, I think we'll start to understand. But the ultimate fix, remember, is $90 million for that interchange. And so being able to have our share in place, I mean, really, it puts us in a strong position to compete for federal funds. So that's another reason for all that.
How long is that $9 million available for?
It's
I mean,
broken
how
down
long do we
over
have to
5 years.
match it?
We have probably 3 years, Jerry. So the other thing too is, remember our Transportation Mobility Board. I think they're a great opportunity to help kind of vet some of these challenges. We'll have the comp plan, we'll have the TMP all finished. They're going to take a lot of that work. They're going to help us kind of look at all the priorities and try to decide what are the most important ones.
And I think the other thing, it's a really good opportunity to pull together the business community and have a conversation with them, because they're the ones that will be collecting that tax, and what does that look like, and how they would support that. We know that there's, that when we make improvements in our community, it does help support the business community. So that needs to really be something going forward that you guys have as a year-long, similar to what we're doing with the comp plan, just kind of a year-long process of getting to that place where when you finally are ready to make the ask, you want success.
Don't we have some internet stuff that was just approved by the state, internet tax?
Sales?
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna affect us.
Well, we have
It doesn't
actually,
affect us as much.
yeah, Tiffany's on a board here with CML trying to sort through how the state, the implications at the state level can trickle down ultimately to local
Right.
government. But I don't think we're not anywhere near.
So we don't know how that affects us yet.
No.
It's nowhere near 11 million, maybe 6 figures if we're lucky. It's, yeah.
What is it?
And if that's a lot more complicated, then, yeah.
Is Kendrick East, are they not able to assist us on getting a pulse of our citizens on potential sales tax?
That's not necessarily their forte,
Right.
but.
Or survey on everything else, why not that?
Yeah,
We
we're pretty much
do it in our survey. And when's the next time we're doing a citizen survey in a business? 2020?
2020, how convenient.
Is this your left brain, right brain behind it?
Yeah, pretty much. Pulling strings.
Okay, all right, so y'all are good on that, okay. Okay, so the,
6 months, Mark. Remind us in 6 months.
Remind
Debbie won't be here to remind us.
I've got your phone.
She might be sitting back here to remind us.
That's what. Okay, so the other two are not money related. One of them is, and I've mentioned this publicly for a number of years, and I've spoken to some of you individually about it, and I think I don't think it's probably ready for 2019, and I think it's something that you really should consider for 2020, possibly even timing-wise, maybe 2021. It would be a direct elect mayor. So it would be having the community elect the mayor versus having the council appoint the mayor. And a couple reasons I say the timing on that is that we have the census. And so with the census, we're pretty certain that we're going to see some shifts and some changes in our population. And as such, we will probably need to realign some of the districts and figure that out. So, and then that will go through the election commission and all that needs to be blessed and approved. So this would be a good time to make a consideration for if you were to do a direct elect mayor, what would that look like? Because it would require changing the way that the current election system is set up. One random idea. And we don't need to solve for this right now, but I want you guys to start thinking about it. And it's one of those things that kind of takes a little bit of working it through your head. But one of the potentials would be to divide the city into 3 districts instead of 4. And you'd have 2 council members in each district, and each would be elected in alternate election seasons. And then the mayor would be an at-large election and would run every 4 years. My main push for this is because I believe that, number one, I believe that the citizens should elect their mayor. And number 2, it is very challenging for communities who have a 2-year mayor to be able to get into regional leadership positions that can help and bring an impact back into the community. For example, I cannot, I've never been able, nobody from Littleton's ever been able to get into leadership on the Metro Mayor's Caucus. And the same thing with Dr. Cog, and the same thing with CML. It's a 4-year plan because that's the way they're set up, because the traditional mayors are 4 years. A number of cities in the state have switched. Castle Rock's the latest one. Their voters approved a mayor direct elect. Inglewood is considering it. Also, cities are not reversing back. They're switching over to a 4-year term. And I think it's probably something. I reached out to CML today, and I wanted to get a list from them about what cities are continuing to do it, and then you guys can kind of see. But most of the cities in the metropolitan area are that. So when you're sitting in a group where you've got the representation of our region, which is, essentially 80% of the population is in the metro region. Littleton's voice is very small because you don't have that ability to get into that secession thing. So that's just something that may be something that I think a lot of citizens think they elect the mayor anyway and may not know that they don't. So that may be something that there should be some outreach on. And would you be in favor? And here's pros, cons, whatever. But
Or if the census cracks 50,000 for the city, it starts to make a lot more sense.
Starts to make a lot more sense, and I think we're headed, because we're at 47 now. So I want you guys, I think it's something that you have to mull over. It's something for the next council to decide. What would happen is that when you did make that change, it would be effective 2 years from the vote, so everybody would be able to realign and do what they needed to do.
It's a charter amendment too.
Yep, and it goes to the voters. So then, speaking of that, the last one that I have, and this is something, again, for you guys, this has got to be on the planning thing, and it probably needs to be, I would say, at least no later than 2021. We have got to get a change in the charter under the city manager's compensation, his severance package. We offer our city manager a 1-month severance. That is a repellent to any city manager. So we know that at some point.
Don't look at me.
Mark, obviously is not going to be city manager forever, but
Are we sure about that?
But I think it's something that council really needs to think about in terms of, because it is going to be a change on the charter, and it's going to be an effort of public information and education as to why would we do this and how should we do it? And it's going to be gathering information and educating the councils. What do other cities do? What is, I think Noel and HR could probably put together some pretty good data and information about, what are recruits looking for and what does that mean? Because you want to get the best and the brightest. You want to get the highest level of talent. You don't want to have somebody get stolen because they've got 2 months better severance across the border than we do. And so that, I think, because that has to go to the charter, and it may even be something you guys really think about pulling that out of the charter. And to have to go to a vote of the citizens to put together a contract for your city manager, I think you might want to take a look at that and see if that's really something that is the best way to do it. Because we are elected, we are represented, we are our employee.
Maybe city attorney also, wouldn't it?
The city attorney is,
What about our judge?
well, we'd have to look at that, but none of their packages right now, I don't think that they're,
I think only the city manager is limited here on the severance.
Well, I'm talking about pulling him out of the charter.
Oh, I see. I see.
yeah. Well, what we do is we do contracts for them, and so we haven't been bound by anything in the charter that would hurt us with either one of those. So, but it is just a city, that would be something to look at, absolutely, because I think that that's one of the reasons why we pulled the council salaries out of the charter, because every time you go to change the council, you have to, and so at some point that becomes something that I think council needs to talk about and think about it in terms of, I mean, it's not far off in the future. But if you're going to do it, it's going to take outreach and planning, and then you can make the change and still have the city manager here.
Sure.
So those were my ballot issues that I wanted to share with you guys. Based on what we've talked about tonight, we'll bring 2 back for conversation on the 25th with more information. The other 3 are ones that you guys will have, Sam has put on the calendar for future conversation in terms of the sales tax, mayor-elect, and manager comp. Any questions or concerns?
Good.
Okay. That is all I had on that, and Mark, I know you have something under manager comments.
I do. So, under the city manager comments here, I kind of alerted council earlier here that I'd like to get your read about how you might want to process a request here by 8 citizens that kind of work through the short-term rental issue. So, I shared with you a cover memo and you can see their proposal here. And so, very specifically, my question to you is whether or not you would like to process in some form another run at the short-term rental issue and an ordinance for that. So a couple of different options. And the specific recommendation here based from staff is that we try to process this after the comp plan. I think just pure timing, the community development staff is really kind of dedicated here to the core issue of the comprehensive plan. And we are right now in the midst of that. And I do have an updated, maybe a little.
All right.
If you wanted to see this. I think in essence, I think what I'm trying to communicate is that if the council wanted to take on short-term rentals now, about the only option that we have for community development is to delay the riverfront corridor. That's the only project for which we can actually get enough time out of the work plan in order for community development to be freed up to do short-term rentals. And I'm pretty confident that's not where you want to go.
That's not what I want to do.
There really isn't any other code issues that I can delay. We took the plan development code, if you saw the note here a couple of weeks ago, that myself and staff already decided we had to postpone that one simply because of the workload of the comp plan. And so I think while their proposal is rather interesting, I would suggest to the council, if you want to take on short-term rentals, we just do it after the comp plan.
I agree.
Okay with that?
And I think it goes beyond the capacity, but also just where it makes sense. There's going to be a lot that is shifting, or how we talk about our land use, etc., throughout the city. So I just think it just makes sense that it becomes a part that subsequent discussion, as are many other reasons why we're pushing other code amendments after the comp plan. So to me, it's in line with our position on some of those other decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I would like to acknowledge the work that these 8 people did. They spent a lot of time at this.
Yeah, it was really
And as reading their proposal, you obviously can see that they kind of wrestled with very similar issues. I think the cover memo kind of highlights, you know, with this specific proposal, if it goes through a public process, when it comes back to council, will it look identical to this? Likely not. So that in itself, we just have to acknowledge that maybe there's good work here, maybe there's a basis to kind of move the conversation, but based on your direction just now here, really, it's the council who's elected after November who's going to have to really wrestle with this thing. Does that make sense?
But I think they present, I mean, I like where they're thinking. They're actually thinking in line of how we're even thinking about the comp plan of different parts of our city serve different purposes.
Yeah.
And they've brought that into consideration. So I think this is good work that we need to bring back at the right time.
And I would also suggest that this is really not a conversation about short-term rentals. This is a conversation about neighborhoods. Because the neighborhoods are being encroached upon on multiple levels. You're going to have to deal with accessory dwelling units at some point. It's not going to go away and it's going to come in hot and heavy. You are going to have to deal with group homes in neighborhoods. They're not going away, and what does that start to look like? And so Airbnb, VRBOs, et cetera, those are not going away. But all of those are within our neighborhoods. And our neighborhoods are not like a corridor on Santa Fe where we can do commercial and we're dealing with. It's a lot more delicate. It's almost, you know, it's more surgical in working with that. And what does that start to look like? So I agree. I think it's timing. It's going to have to be discussed. The timing needs to be more cohesive with the rest of the work schedule. All right, we're all good on that?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, council, we're adjourned.
Great.
Thank you.